Hello, good evening, and good morning in the US time. Hi, everybody. Well, thanks for attending the second event of the Nate's Night Art Talk Series. Well, tonight, we have a talk organized by Arts Administrator Associations, and the event was generously supported by the Consulate, U.S. Consulate General, Hong Kong and Macau. We are glad to have this topic, arts happening in the arts world. And my deepest thankfulness to three particular guest speakers, one from Hong Kong and two from US. They spent the time with us tonight and share some of their observations and views. And so let me have a quick introduction to the three speakers, and then I will invite them to share some of their interesting ideas and perspective with us. First, from Hong Kong, Rosanna Herries. She is experienced art consulting, and she has a business running on Sinclair Arts, and also have co-founded a digital platform which helped the local arts communities to combat the coronavirus in the crisis. And that's one of the very encouraging activities. We are in the crisis of the public health situation. We rely on the digital art means to do something. And two other speakers, one from US, Leslie Greene Bowman. She's president of Thomas Jefferson Foundations. And the foundations also operates UNESCO World Heritage Site. So another speaker also from US, Andrea Sydney. She is co-director of Performing Arts Strategies and American Arts Abroad. So she is experienced professionals in the dance field. So tonight we have a very interesting combination, mix of practitioners from visual arts and performing arts. And I believe they may have very insightful ideas about what's the art scenes happening during the crisis and what are the possible futures and challenges in the future if we make good use of the digital art means, and whether we can create a brighter future. So can I invite in turn, first with Leslie, to share some of her ideas about the art scenes during the crisis or in the post-crisis, and then turn to Andrea, and then back to Hong Kong to Rosanna. So hello, Leslie, good to see you in the morning.
Thank you, Patrick. It's a great pleasure and an honor to be here. I thought that you all might just want to have a chance to see a little bit of Monticello. And here you see it. It's a World Heritage Site. It's Thomas Jefferson's home. And we are not normally in the digital arts, I have to say, but we've been adapting quickly. It doesn't look like my slides are going to advance, so that's all right. We can just come back to me. But what we are at Monticello is a 2,500 acre plantation. That means we deal with the arts of Monticello as well as slavery. And normally our tours are on site and guided. And while we have been closed because of the coronavirus, we made a decision to keep our staff intact. So we had to pivot about 100 front-facing staff across the organization into other pursuits. And the big one, of course, is virtual. So what we've been doing is training our online front people to get behind cameras and to give virtual live guided tours. Monticello, as you can see, is an architectural masterpiece. It has great collections. We also host digital artists to do light shows. We've hosted opera. We have a range of activities here, But most all of them are usually experienced by coming to the site. So we've made a huge pivot, and we have weekly programming now, streaming live. We also, you can reserve a live tour with a guide who will take you around and show you what you want to see. And we're starting to move into how we can involve other digital artists and stream on our website. So if you went to our website right now, it would actually have a page of what we're live streaming this week.
So, well, we're listening to one cases on the virtual museum and tours, and we also see some of the great changes and transformations in terms of the programs, in terms of the organizations in your museum and in your heritage sites. So can I turn to Andrea?
Absolutely, thank you. And I particularly want to thank Tisaho for the original invitation and you for inviting me to be part of this conversation. My background is particularly in dance, so I can talk with some expertise about that, but I've also included a few examples of what's happening now in the orchestra, music world, and in theater. So let me just run through them briefly. There's so many. There's been such an explosion, a virtual explosion, a literal explosion of availability of work online. And I'll point to a few different opportunities. From the orchestra world, the League of American Orchestras has been tracking the explosion in that industry, and orchestras from A to Z have been filling the internet with music. Since launching symphonyspot.org on April 14th, over 3,800 users in 41 countries have tuned in to listen to orchestral music. In particular, I want to just note that the New York Youth Symphony, and Kelly, thank you for helping me on this, showing some of the links that and virtual or visual signs that you can see. The New York Youth Symphony replaced its Carnegie Hall cancellation with an online performance by 71 orchestra members. And when you look at the picture of it on the screen, it's impossible to think, how can 71 individuals working separately in different places all around the area of the city are all performing at the same time? I don't know how they did it, but they did it. In theater, the Pittsburgh Public Theater has launched its Public Playtime series, which is a new online reading series hosted by its artistic director that brings great classic plays and the work of extraordinary Pittsburgh writers to its audience through the internet 2 nights a week, and it will be ongoing for some time. Richard Nelson, who is a very well-known playwright, has a history of something called the Apple Plays, which have been produced by the Public Theater. And in this time of stay at home and isolation, he actually wrote a play, very contemporary, very now, with 4 of the actors that he's worked with before, all working separately from home. And it was produced on the Public's website for a very limited time frame. And I'll go into that later as we talk about some of the issues. In dance, I can go on and on and on. There are classes, there are warm-ups, there are free online workshops. The New York City Ballet's digital spring season is now available to watch from anywhere around the world. They're bringing back works that some are in rep, some have not been in rep. It's archival work, some more recent work, and twice a week they're showing these works. There are artist interviews, there are virtual commissions, there are online galas that are being produced. Some artists are journaling. In particular, I'm very impressed with Stephen Petronio, a New York-based choreographer who was the first male dancer for Trisha Brown, and now has had his own company for a while. And he's been journaling these flash posts that are extremely intelligent and thoughtful and human and in isolation. One can learn Merce Cunningham's 50 looks. If you want to go online to the Cunningham Trust or the Merce Cunningham Dance Company, you can learn a piece by Merce from one of his main dancers or many dancers, who is now part of the trust administration, Patricia Lent. And just to point out that Tricia Brown herself, although she's no longer alive, her company remains intact, working on pieces that Tricia has done. And they have, for the Zoom community, they have performed a piece called Roof Piece from 1971, which was on the roofs. Tricia lived in downtown New York in Soho, and her top apartment looked at all the roofs, and she made a piece in 1971 called Roof Piece. It was then made and redone in 2011 at the High Line in New York, which is an outdoor walking path. And then she's now they've made it for Zoom, titled Room/Roof Piece. The space is contracted to be only the size of our screen. What it retains is the attempt to transmit gesture through distance, whether real or virtual. So there are, I think that Kelly's putting up all these different links so that you can take a look. There are so many more. In terms of observations, as I said, you know, the vault's opening up wide. We'll go into some of these conversations as we get more into the deep dive into the discussion about the digital world and its impact on the arts. So I'll stop for now. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And then thanks, Rosanna.
Absolutely, and thank you, Leslie and Andrea, for those wonderful introductions to some of the work that you're doing and the projects that you're working with and keeping tabs on. In Hong Kong, there's been a lot of initiative to take things onto the digital realm. And in my capacity as a working group member for Art Power Hong Kong, I want to just introduce a little bit about what we're doing as a community initiative here. So Art Power Hong Kong was put together initially as a creative solution to the impact of COVID-19 on the arts community here. It's a collaborative and a completely non-commercial campaign for the arts community in Hong Kong that looks to celebrate the arts here and also to facilitate all of our partners in bringing their content online. So we now have over 120 partners, and that continues to grow. It's been really amazing and completely overwhelmingly wonderful to see how organizations from across the board in Hong Kong have come together to support each other and to showcase an open resource of collaboration of all the initiatives that are taking place. Now, some of those are new commissions, new products, new initiatives that are responding to this moment, and some of them are new iterations of archival material. And so there's this very wide-ranging resource available to our audiences here. And really the focus is making sure that we can showcase not only to local audiences, but also internationally what's happening in the arts in Hong Kong, showcase that things are happening, it's open, it's active, the arts in Hong Kong are resilient, and there's lots to show. And really the tenets of the initiative and why it came together was to really showcase how connectivity and collaboration can create some really fantastic new results for a very difficult and trying time. And I think that the outcome, one of the key outcomes for all of us in the last few weeks and months has been to showcase the value and the power of art as a uniting and also a healing force for the community in Hong Kong. And I think, you know, the numbers of people that are visiting the website and looking at what the organizations in Hong Kong are doing is very much testament to that. So we continue to look at how we can grow that, how we can continue to demonstrate the power of art and also showcase a positive message and, you know, bring creativity to the community on a day-to-day basis.
Rosanna, would you like to show the Power Hong Kong website? Or
certainly.
Can you give us the link on?
No, I can. So it should be on your screens now.
So this is the platform you mentioned.
You can see, you know, as a platform, we don't create content. It's we are a facilitator and a centralized platform for our partners. So as you can see here, there's a whole features section, and everything is listed chronologically. So that as things are posted, it comes up, and you can watch videos, you can join workshops, you can read essays from artists, you can watch dance productions, and you can also get behind the scenes with artists in their studios. We've got a couple of interviews coming up, museum directors who are taking audiences behind the scenes for how they're, how they're bringing their collections online at this moment. We're also conducting a weekly talk series in which we are supporting our partners, bringing them to our audiences in a series of online talks as well. And that's really addressing topics that are key and very pertinent and relevant at the moment. And as you can see here, just a quick overview, we really do have partners from across the infrastructure and the ecosystem and from the major museum, profits, and also the Arts Administration Association. So it's a really fabulous display of the community coming together.
Okay, I see. Thanks very much. Well, I have a questions after listening to all of your interesting cases. Well, I think no one will doubt that the internet or the digital technology help us a lot and in many different ways. But since the technologies become getting more popular and more popular, our sector will used to have a question: how can these technology space can bring new, maybe revenue, maybe bring new audience to visual arts, museum, galleries, or to the performing arts sectors? What do you think about the roles of technology in this crisis period, which may help us to cultivate new base of audience or even new basis of revenue? Do you think it works?
I'll jump in here.
Go ahead, Leslie.
No, go ahead, Andrea.
I was going to say, I don't think we know the answer to this yet. I think that it's, we don't know on the outside, on the end side, whether the impact of the digital media will expand audiences to see live performance, or whether it will contract because they have the access to anything almost anything they want to see online. Therein lies some real challenges for the performing arts. I mentioned a while ago that many years ago, when video was new to the dance world, there was a huge concern, great concern by the dance community that audiences wouldn't come to the theater because they could see dance on video. Well, of course, that was not the case. Live audiences grew exponentially. When you have a camera showing you what it wants you to see, you of course are not seeing the whole stage. And whereas if you're sitting in the theater, you can choose to look at whatever you want to, but it's your choice. It's not the camera's. It's just one issue. I think that the dance community in particular will have real trouble determining whether they're comfortable in a digital media or whether they need to be and want to be and should be live. One of my colleagues in Great Britain said to me, she can't watch it on video. She can't hear their feet. She can't see their sweat. She can't hear their breathing. And that's all part of the experience of being in a live performance. So those are just a few thoughts. I'll turn it over to Leslie for sure.
Well, it's interesting because it goes both ways, right? And it also is, there's a difference between digital media simulating the real and digital media being the art form. And so I think we're gonna see a crossover back and forth as we've learned more through this period, this crisis. One of the interesting things at Monticello is the opposite of what you described, Andrea, because normally on site. You go through the house in a group of 25 people. There's a rope. You can't get across the room to look at the clock or the painting or the mirror. But in a live guided tour, we can take you right up to it and show you the details, so you can actually see it better. The other thing I've noticed, and I don't know if you're seeing it, I imagine you are, is we have a whole new audience of families and children. Because during this crisis, children are home. They are being homeschooled. And so we've developed a whole menu of programming just for families and children. And we've timed it at the point of the day where mom is probably just about, or dad, is really ready to put youngster in front of a screen and get a cup of coffee. And it's been very, very popular. So I wonder if we're not expanding audience in some ways we hadn't even thought of.
I totally agree. It's happening in Lincoln Center has concerts for kids, especially designed 1 day a week afternoon for kids to watch. Almost all the dance companies are offering classes for parents and children in so many ways. Those dance companies that can afford and have the resources to keep themselves present online are the ones who are able to take the most advantage of this. It's much harder for individual artists who are not able to pay for or cover the expenses for this kind of work. So that's a big challenge.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think, going back to Leslie, your point about audience engagement, definitely there has been an expansion in the way that people are speaking to their audiences, and there's a huge raise in accessibility, but also the audience agency in what they're choosing to see and what they can see. And I think that that's going to have a hugely positive impact on the arts and cultural sector as a whole. Certainly in Hong Kong and internationally, because people have seen and they've had access to things they've never had access before, and it's really sparked this level of interest and engagement. And I don't think that in-person engagement, whether it's with the visual arts or with the performing arts, will truly ever be replaced, but there can be this relationship where the engagement happens on multiple platforms, whether that's in-person or digital and virtual, and quite often in tandem with each other. That can be very effective. And hopefully it's going to, as I said, spark that engagement for people to go out and see things in person that they didn't even know was on their doorstep, or they didn't know that they were passionate about, or even had an interest in, and going, like with the families. And a lot of children will be able to say, I'm really interested in this, mom and dad, like, take me. And hopefully that'll encourage the next generation of art lovers and dance and theatre lovers, and that's going to bring in audiences which the arts and performing arts sectors have been looking over the last decade of how to engage. And a lot of the technology that we're seeing coming through and coming to the fore in the last few months in a very much fast-tracked fashion has been in the pipeline for a while. It just hasn't had that real boost, or the kind of the necessity to be the first and the foremost tool which people are utilizing to speak to their audiences and kind of express themselves.
I want to, sorry.
Yeah, please go on.
I just want to, I want to talk about the transition from this time of self-isolation and quarantine and being alone to when and how people will go back to live performance. There are a lot of issues. There was a conversation among several presenters, programmers who run different types of venues in the South, and they are struggling to determine how they will open their spaces, when they will be able to open their spaces, and what it will be like both for their backstage crew, their house, their front of house, as well as the artists who they may invite and hopefully invite to perform. And all of that needs thinking, serious thinking and planning almost now, although everything's changing so rapidly, it's hard to plan with one particular focus in mind. It'll evolve. It will evolve over time. I know that the National Theatre of Great Britain has 4 different scenarios that they're trying to identify in relationship to time frame. What happens now? What happens in 6 months? What happens in 9 months to a year? So that they have different plans in place according to when they can start to develop audiences in their spaces or in their space. I was amazed by the remark of one of the presenters on this conversation that we had, asking the artists, how will they feel if they take control of the green room, the backstage green room, rather than have people come in? Will they prefer to be in isolation in the green room and take care of their own space? No one's thought about that before. This is all new. So that's just a small example of what some of the things are that people are beginning to develop as they search for answers to returning to live performance and audiences in theaters.
I see one interesting question from the floor. One raised a question, what opportunities your organization found apart from audience building or maintaining online presence?
I can jump in on that one. We realized that we'd become tutors for our constituents in Zoom and technologies. A side effect of this was that as we began to convert our programming through different technological channels, we were helping our stakeholders learn these new technologies. Another aspect of this is that as we are thinking about opening, we're planning a lot more outdoor programming in ways we had never thought about before. And that's actually been very, very exciting. And we're thinking about collaborating a lot with community arts organizations to bring things up to that lawn behind me, right? What we call the West Lawn. Obviously, we're not going to have people densely on that lawn for a while, but outdoor tours and programs, performances where people can space out is something that we're really putting a priority on.
So that's, yes, go on.
Yeah, American Dance Abroad is really a facilitator, trying to develop opportunities for American artists overseas. So one of the things that we're launching actually this week with the conversation is something called Chats Across Borders, where my business partner and I will have conversations with international programmers, folks that we know, relationships that we've built, and have this kind of a dialogue about what they're planning, how they're managing, what's the future looking like. And we will post those onto our website so that choreographers and dance companies in the United States can start hearing from international colleagues about what the plans are and how they're coping with things. We also feel that we need to do a lot more research now. American Dance Abroad got started out of a research project that Carol Linda Dickey and I did. And we think now is the time to take a look at, again, it's almost as if we're starting 10 years. What we started 10 years ago is almost the same as what we have now. What will be the appetite for American dance overseas post-COVID? How will programmers be able to support and present American dance? Will they, or will they become much more localized for a period of time? And how will American artists be able to afford to travel? And what kind of travel will there be? I agree with Leslie. I think that the first phase of returning to live performance will be a lot more solo work and working in non-mainstream spaces, outdoors, museums, galleries, places where there's more space for people to distance. And then we'll see what happens.
Absolutely, and looking from the visual arts sector, a lot of museums in Hong Kong are starting to look to reopen, and there's obviously they're going to have to do that with a consideration to the social distancing regulations that are in place. And there's a number of ways that they can do that with time-slotted entrance points, specific tours that have allocated times, keeping exhibitions virtual so that people have the confidence and the access to see exhibitions from their own homes if they don't feel like they're ready to go out and about. And I think that that's a large consideration here is, audience sentiment. A lot of people are going to take a lot longer to feel confident going out and engaging in mass crowds. There's the regulations might relax, things might change on that score, but it's going to take a long time for the market to get back to a feeling of wanting to engage in the levels that we were seeing before the COVID-19 outbreak. And so, if we look at what's happened in the last few months, there's been a lot of new creativity. We're looking down at completely new skill sets and how to engage in different ways. And I think that the key thing is how is taking those learnings forward into the development of the new normal. We don't know what that's going to be yet because we're not there yet. We're still in the reaction phase. We're still in the support and the community focus phase. And in Hong Kong and across mainland China, that's starting to move forward into the revival. But it's a slow process, and at the moment there aren't set answers on how that's going to formulate. But there are a lot of exciting things to take away from the initiatives that are happening. There's a lot of new experimentation that I'm sure will influence how we present across the board, whether that's in galleries, museums, or from the performing arts sector.
Well, after listening your response, I'm quite impressed by the new insights. Well, it seems that the crisis gives us time to reflect on how we create the programs, whether we can collaborate with the overseas, or whether we can open up a little bit about the planning process so other people can coming in. Well, that kind of reflection is becoming more intensive. And also the reflections on the program direction, whether we can increase the parent-children's programs so that we have a new direction for pushing some new contents online. Well, that's a kind of a good moment for us to we think about the strategies, programming, and as well as the planning for the future. I think that's quite a surprise to me, at least from my humble experience. Okay, well, there is another questions picking up from the floor. One said there's pose COVID-19 challenges could be another war, where of outbreak. Do you have any advice on forward strategic planning? So if the crisis may come again, although we don't know when and how, but we can't think that normal things is return to normal. That would be a kind of recurrent crisis. So what will be the cases in the future planning if crisis will come sooner or later?
Well, I think from a kind of communications perspective, if I take the first attempt at answering that question, it's always being fast to respond and being flexible in your approach, and primarily being very aware of what the local community around you is thinking and what they need, and responding to that acutely, so that you are authentic and compassionate in your response from the outset, and be there for what the community need is at that point. So that's the first stage when you're looking at that initial reaction, and responding to that as that moment develops. And then, as Andrea was starting to talk about earlier, there is a point when you turn towards a recovery and a revival, but you have to get the timing right on that, and that's very tricky to see. You have to test the water and find out, what the audience that you're speaking to is actually interested in, and what level of engagement they're prepared to. So having those initiatives that are virtual or digital or can be accessible from a number of platforms means that in the future we're going to have a much more diverse range of ways to speak to our audiences.
One of the things we've talked a lot about in our Zoom meetings, so we've had to isolate, is being much more innovative and taking risks and responding and evaluating quickly. And I think that's actually brought a wave of excitement to an institution that could be considered rather staid and traditional. And our board has been very, very supportive of that. I think the elephant standing in the room for all of us, though, is funding. How long can we function like this when, for us, putting virtual programming out there is an attempt to, of course, retain audience and try new things in new ways, but it doesn't have any revenue streams associated with it yet. So I think that as we're looking at another outbreak, we also have to think about financially how we can survive and cope and bring in new revenue streams. For example, we have a retail, an online retail arm that's actually been booming since everyone's been home. Now, it's not making up for our lost $52,000 a day that we're losing being closed, but it's interesting to watch where you can push and pull on the levers, right? So that our value was to keep staff no matter what, because we think that's our most valuable asset. And so we've really been working hard at alternative plans that allow us to pull back here, but keep the talent so that when we can open, we can experiment, we can try new things. We have great creative people ready to go.
I'll add to that, and I think that's very perceptive and smart. You know, I think that this is a real wake-up call for the performing arts. To realize that they cannot depend on live performance, and they for sure now can't depend on ticket buyers as they used to, and funding will be a great issue. One of the other complications for the performing arts will be the negotiations with their unions, if they have unions or they are involved with unions, and that's usually the larger institutions, but some of the mid-sized institutions also. And I guess in terms of strategic planning, as we move forward, that conversation and that relationship and that collaboration with unions will be instrumental in determining how comfortable going forward they will be in light of the ebb and flow of this virus, the roller coaster ride that we're all on. I mentioned before the Apple plays and Richard Nelson, and I was shocked that it only lasted for 3 days online because they had to negotiate with the union when they still haven't finished that negotiation to be able to put it back online, whether for pay or not. Yes? I'm not hearing you. Oh, did we lose Pat? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yep, you're loud and clear for me.
I couldn't hear Patrick just now. Patrick, you're muted.
Come back. Okay. Well,
I'm sorry, I lost you.
No. It's a crisis. Oh, please go on. Yes.
No, so I was just saying that the Apple plays, the issue of negotiation with the unions, because the unions make a lot of money in performance, and how is that going to, all the issues around finances are going to be ones that in terms of strategic planning for the future, now's the time that they need to start talking and be open to collaborating in new ways. And everybody has to think now out of the box and not assume that they can go back to what was normal. There is no old normal anymore. We need to accept that there will be a new normal, and it may not be new normal until sometime in the future. So planning in stages might be advisable for organizations that can afford to do that.
So, well, I think different art forms may, I'm not sure whether different art forms would have a little bit different when they plan what may be the possible scenario. Some art form may move faster or forward, or some art forms may have more obstacles. I'm not sure the degrees and what kind of differences would be. So if you're in your experience, what may be the case, whether visual arts or performing arts had quite a difference in responding to these kind of challenges? Do you think in the future?
I'm sorry, one of the major issues for dance, more so than theater or music, is the issue that dance has always been a touring art form. Most companies are on the road. Alvin Ailey company has been on the road. They're on the road 48 weeks a year, pretty much. They're the most tourable company in the United States. Other than the big civic institutions like the big ballet companies that stay home and have home seasons, most artists, at least with small to mid-sized companies, tour to make money and to show their work. They don't want to be in isolation or just be home. Not so much, I guess, among independent artists and new artists working in collaborative new forms. They do their work and they all have other jobs. It's not as if they are what we normally think of as mainstream companies anymore, but it is still a touring art form. And the question will be whether that will be viable going forward short-term and or long-term. Until the airlines are back up and functional, until people are comfortable traveling, until presenters are interested in presenting companies and can afford to do that. This is all new territory that we don't have the answers for.
I see.
Yeah, and so I mean, to slightly bring in Raymond's question on the Q&A and to what Andrea is saying as well, do you think the virus will encourage more collaboration and more community within the international art sphere? And I think that the answer to that is resoundingly yes. The impact and the power of collaboration and of resource sharing has been so highlighted in the last few months that I don't think there's any organization that can go back from that or see that actually, some of the traditionally competitive barriers that have been put up when they come down, they can create very fantastic, advancements for wide swathes of the arts industry, whether that's from the galleries, whether that's museums, whether that's performing arts sectors. And there's been a number of digital initiatives, along the similar lines of something like Art Power. You've got things like Art at a Time Like This, which is specifically an artist format set up by two leading curators in America, Barbara Pollock and Anne Verhellen. And artists from around the world have participated in that. And there have been resources for artists specifically as well, that have been platforms for artists to share performances that have been taken off the stage and not aired because of the coronavirus. And I think that that sense of coming together to support each other has really been very beneficial for a lot of artists specifically. We were talking about how do people generate income when you're living in isolation and you can't perform, you can't show your artwork. And that sense of being able to come together and collectively show your new works, your new commissions, is a very powerful tool. And there's some of the major leading art galleries have shared their virtual art spaces for smaller galleries. That's just one of two of the initiatives that have come out of this current situation. So yes, I think that the collectivity and the support within the industry will definitely have a long-lasting impact, or I hope it will anyway.
One of the questions that I have for us and for the future is, how will all of this that's being digitized be preserved? Will it be preserved? Will it be accessible into the future? Does it live now and then go away? And I don't know that we have the answer for that one yet. Or maybe we do.
I can't even find my emails 10 years ago. Well, but I do have a questions about the mechanics about the transformation. Since we assume that we can develop many possibilities online. But behind these changes, whether our organization is ready to pick it up. I pick up from one example from Leslie, because you mentioned that when your museum creates the art programs, the touring programs, there were digital artists working with you. There are technicians behind your teams, and all that kind of technical backups is so important for people who want to transform their activities in some way on the digital platform. So I'm not sure whether in different cities and countries, do you see what will be the art organizations? Are they ready to meet this challenge of transformations?
Well, I have to believe, and I'm probably not the person to respond to this, Rosanna, I'm thinking you probably have a lot to say, but my immediate thought is, of course they are, because artists are innately creative and innovative. And as you open up new channels and the feedback loop is exponentially accelerated, I can't believe that this won't be looked back on in 50 years as a watershed moment. Not that some won't, some will thrive, some will not survive, but it's as somebody said, it's a new normal, and it's a tidal wave that's crashing through our culture with phenomenal impact that we can only begin to evaluate, right?
Okay, yeah.
Absolutely. I think I missed the beginning part of that conversation. I'm afraid I think I dropped out for a little bit, but Patrick, can you repeat the question? Sorry.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm asking how arts organizations, or in what ways they can be more ready to meet the challenges of these digital transformations. If the transformation requires a lot of resources and backups.
Well, I think a large part of that is the continued communication between organizations and learning from the initiatives that, either they're putting in place themselves or that you can experience and watch from other organizations. And continuing to engage, continuing to share, and continuing to learn in this period of transformation until we get to a stage when we can more confidently put in place timelines for when we can have in-person activations.
I think this will be critical in terms of funding, at least in the United States, that foundations need to understand that organizations need support, not just for preparing for live performance, but also preparing for a digital life. And how do they do that? And who gets the support for that? And I think Rosanna's concept of artists coming together to collaborate in new ways will strengthen their ability to find support rather than going solo, going alone. So, I guess all boats rise in some, or whatever the cliche is, that if they're working together, they strengthen their presence and they strengthen the opportunity that they might have rather than trying to do it on their own for independent and small organizations, so that they don't just disappear. The larger institutions will always have an easier time of it, and they are probably building into their staffing for the future a digital expertise, along with all of the production expertise that goes with producing work.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to look at things like, Kickstarter. They're a crowdfunding resource for the arts, and up until now, it's been specifically looking at putting on art forms, crowdfunding money to put on art installations. And they've just released Lights On, which is very much focused at allowing organizations to crowdfund money in order to fund the logistics and day-to-day operations of their organizations. And that's a major shift in terms of what people think is worth putting their money towards. And people are seeing very much the moment that, yes, there's a lot of content that's going online. Yes, there's a lot of content that can be digitalized quite quickly and for quite a small amount of budget, but that's not sustainable in the long term. And there has to be ways of, supporting the arts organizations around you. So I'm excited by that. I think that's, it's a great initiative from Kickstarter. Another one that struck me is the Artist Support Pledge, which was initially started by a British artist, but it's now running internationally. And it's very simple. You post as an artist, you post a picture of your artwork on Instagram, and it has to be £200 or $200 or less. And once that artist has sold 5 pieces, he or she pledges to buy another work from another artist. So it's artists supporting other artists through a very, very simple and very clever Instagram campaign. And that's often how it works. The simple ideas are the most successful ones. They're the ones that have the biggest impact.
Well, we still have a little bit time to, and I see the accumulated questions on the list. So would you like to address some? And also I call for questions from the floor, and if you want to raise or ask questions, any one of our guest speakers, so please be frank and open to write down your questions. And
so one question here is very specifically to me, so let me answer that first, which is, how long will Art Power run for? Is it a long-term project? And going back to kind of what Leslie was saying, we started Art Power Hong Kong as a very reactive measure as a creative solution to the situation and to support the community here and to project a positive message. And we've had to react, we've had to pivot practically every week, every day as the situation changes. And so we are going to be extending Art Power Hong Kong, and I'm really excited about that. We're going to be extending it until at least 2021. And that is very much off the back of the feedback from our partners. So, you know, those partners are 120 arts organizations in Hong Kong, and they've all expressed an interest and a desire to continue this initiative and to continue centralizing their content in the Art Power Hong Kong platform. So our mission from the outset has always been to support the community, and we will react and pivot our position so that we can continue to best do that.
And these questions is also echoing some of the general attitudes when we deal with digital arts projects. Sometimes people will ask for long-term commitments or wow effects, whether the digital project can attract a lot of audience. Personally, I'm a little bit doubt of this, for I see all the digital art projects could be very experimental and trying to do something. If we have to be long-term and we have to be putting it as a long commitment, I think that would be quite burdensome for doing experiments. I'm not sure whether this attitude is right or not, but that's my impressions of digital art projects.
Well, I think that in many cases, the digital sort of expression of a project is not the only iteration of how that art, whether it's an artwork, whether it's performance, whether it's a whole building like Leslie's museum, there's many ways in which you can engage on that, and quite often the digital iteration is just one way of having a touch point with the artist's work and the artist's creativity. So it's never going to be, unless it's very specifically a digital artwork, it's not going to be the only way to immerse yourself with that work. It's just one touch point. And really, I think that what's going to be the major shift is that people, especially the next generation of young art lovers, they don't necessarily see digital engagement and offline engagement as two separate things. Their worlds operate continuously in an ongoing engagement with their digital screens, whether that's their iPhones or their computers, as well as in-person, face-to-face interaction. So there's a much more blurred boundary between those kind of formats than there would have been, for the generation, my generation and above, where was probably the last generation that didn't grow up with a mobile phone and a screen, you know, from day one. And so that's, you know, for the next generation of art lovers, it's completely seamless, that experience of everyday life.
Mm.
I think it'll be interesting to identify how artists who are ultimately incredibly creative and inventive will look towards the future of educating young people through the digital medium to explore performing arts in a live context, and how to marry that relationship. And I think artists and teachers, art teachers, will be the ones who find the way to engage young people, children, in ways that will expand the horizons for viewing the performing arts in multiple ways, not just through a digital medium and not just through a live performance. So I have hope for that. I have hope that we, the arts community, will step forward in defining and developing new methodologies for education and training that will allow for all different kinds of experience, and for democratizing the arts so that everybody has the opportunity to enjoy them.
Yeah, I mean, hear to that. Very well put, Andrea. I think that's a very, very good point.
Thank you.
So would anyone have questions would like to ask our guest speakers? Or any questions from the speakers we would like to ask each other?
So many.
For the audience that's listening, I wonder if if there's something that they've experienced or are doing that we should know about, that we don't know about, that we haven't already identified as in this digital world, how the arts are functioning. Does anyone have another idea that we should know about? So they can write the answer.
Right.
Yes. Any advice to us?
That's a Pandora's box.
Of course.
I think we might be here all day or all night. No, but I mean, I would love to hear. There's so many.
Well, I mean, you know, part of this,
there.
Right. It's part of this learning process for all of us.
Absolutely. So Vicky's saying art perhaps is the best form of human creativity. So artists are creators. This is the time. So definitely, I mean, the way that artists are reacting to this moment has been very insightful, very pertinent, and art has always been a very acute reflection of society. And now I would say more than ever, we need the arts to reflect on how, you know, society is responding to this collectively, and this, you know, this crisis, which is unprecedented for everybody around the world.
To answer the second part of Vicky's question, I think it's both and. I don't think it's either or. I think that there is a digital media art that's being developed through the digital platform and for digital viewing. And I think that it's also becoming an instrumental methodology to expand audience awareness, audience connection, collaborative connections, and sort of opening up, like Fort Knox, opening up the vaults of available material that the audiences and the public can see. I mean, it's never before have we had this kind of ability to see work in this way. So I guess that's my answer for that.
I heard a rather good analogy the other day of comparing online experiences with the arts as to online dating. You know, you might like the look of a photograph or of an experience online, but if you're really excited by it, you want to go in person. You want to check them out in person to see if there's a real spark, and to see if you really want to take it to the next level. So I thought that was that's a
very good analogy.
Good analogy for it.
That's perfect.
Yeah. Well, break to rules. If We don't break the rules. Oh, okay. Yes.
Break the rules.
Yes. Thanks for the compliments. Yeah. Well, so well, we have a fruitful discussions tonight and in the morning, and we absorbed a lot of ideas. At least I find that many useful ideas for me to rethink about the strategic plan or the organizational change for the arts and cultural organizations. So thanks very much for attending the events and give us such insightful ideas and inspiring ideas. Okay, well, that's the last one to. Oh, thanks very much.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
okay.
everybody.
Yes.
Take care, stay safe. Stay safe and sane.
Yes. Before the announcement of ending the meetings, shall I invite the participant to fill up the surveys, feedback surveys, so that we can collect your opinions and comments. Thanks very much. And
Thank you.
For the guest speakers, we will end it soon, the meeting. Yes. Thanks for attending and participating.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.